Did you catch what came out of the World Economic Forum in early November? It was this. The World Economic Forum convened a 3-day conference in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai called Narrating the Future. I think this is good news. What it means is they realize that the narrative that they have been putting out there with the fourth industrial revolution and the Great Reset stuff is failing. And I mean, of course it's failing. You will own nothing and be happy. That was one of their campaigns. And recently they've come out with a thing about we're all going to take cold showers for the sake of the planet and we're going to eat bugs. You've seen these probably. I hope you have seen them by now. The World Economic Forum is terrible at narratives. And so for some reason they thought that getting together in Dubai was going to allow them to come out at the end with a compelling narrative that the world would buy into. And I'm going to go over some of the things that were said at this conference in a minute with you. But I just want to say first, before I start, that this is how I envision what's happening right now. All right, the globalists, the technocrats, the totalitarians, they've been undermining the Western way of life for a really long time. They've been demoralizing us. They've been defanging us. As A.W. Tozer put it, they've turned us into pussycats, tabby cats, harmless, cute, harmless. And they've given us so much comfort and so much affluence that we have been lulled into a state of, like, we're degraded. We're degraded humanity at this point. We don't have anything strong under our feet. One of the main things they did, of course, was undermine Christianity and undermine the family. So that's been going on a long, long time. But COVID, the pandemic, the plandemic, has allowed them to destroy the other things that we built on top of those foundations of the Christian Western worldview. And I don't care if you're an atheist or not. 2,000 years of civilization was built upon the Christian worldview. Atheists live in it. I don't care if they believe in it. They live in it. The legal system, art, values, family, traditions, everything built on the Christian foundation. So, where was I going with this? Oh yes, COVID. COVID has allowed them now to come along and destroy the structures that we built upon that very, very strong foundation. As you're seeing, businesses being decimated, incomes being decimated, jobs lost all over the place. They want to replace people with robots. They want to replace cars with autonomous vehicles that nobody drives. They want bio-digital convergence. Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, this guy at the podium here, he has said openly and numerous times that
at the end, what the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
A fusion of physical, digital, and biological identities. And we're watching it happen with the metaverse and the virtual reality, with the cell phones tracking our biological well-being so that we can have permissions, digital permissions to go into wherever we want to go. That's what they're doing here. That's what it's about. And they want digital currency because digital currency will allow them to merge all of these things that I've just talked about, right? And their narrative is terrible. So as they've destroyed Western civilization, and we're kind of standing in metaphorical ruins right now of everything we've ever known, there's this moment where the future is uncertain. Who will rebuild upon the ruins they've created? Of course, they want to. And they have the vast majority of the money. They own almost all of the media. So at this conference, Klaus Schwab and this sheikh, or whoever he was, his name is Al Gargawi, from United Arab Emirates, they were saying, we've got to build the narrative, the story that Western civilization will rebuild upon for the future. But guess what that means? This is the good part. It means they don't know what story they're going to tell us to get us to buy into this. And that means we have a chance to shape that narrative, to build that story, to tell the story that we're going to rebuild on. James Corbett just did a video about this, which is really good. Explains the whole concept really well. And there's all kinds of other people coming out and explaining that we are at this crisis moment and we need to, hang on to our legal foundations, our freedoms, freedom of speech. By the way, let me interject here. I dislike this thing, our freedoms. There is a state of being free, and there is a state of being a slave. There's not multiple freedoms. There's freedom, and that's it. Okay, now back to my thesis. We have a chance right now to build the story, the narrative that we're going to get up every morning and have sort of as the defining characteristic all around us, the foundation under our feet. We can build that narrative right now because, as they've just admitted at that conference, they don't have a clue what that narrative is going to be in order to get us to go into this bio-digital great reset convergence thing. A lot of people want to be in control of this narrative. But you know who I think has the best chance? Are the people that can build it on the basis which they tried to destroy. I think we have to build the narrative again on the virtues and principles of Christianity. That faith in particular is what got us all the way to where we had equal rights, freedom of speech, freedom from unlawful search and seizure. Slavery was abolished. We had ways of addressing corporations that were being predatory. Granted, in the last 25, 30 years, those have all been eroded. Corruption, bribery, subversion. They were already destroying our civilization before COVID. COVID is just the cherry on top of the sundae. It's the last hurrah. It's the bombing campaign where they're trying to reduce us to rubble. But the reason they're able to do it is because they had already reduced our spirits to rubble in many ways by undermining that all-important foundation of the Western world, Christianity. I'm not talking about the churches. The churches are totally corrupt. They're done. But the spirit of Christianity is not. It's still there. And if you want to get a feeling for what I mean, you can watch the video that I did maybe last week called Living Under Law or Living Under Grace. And it's really important that we don't just poo-poo this idea like, oh, listen, thanks, Polly, for the advice, but we've progressed past the need for a sky daddy. Don't you know that? How uncool and unhip can you be? What are you, from the 18th century? What are you, from the 12th century? No, I'm from now. And I see through the tricks that they pulled to get some people to think like that. Like it was a primitive mind that needed God. It was a primitive mind that needed the Bible as a philosophical tool and a guide for value systems and virtue and vice and how to avoid that, how to avoid temptation. You're just foolish. Science has got this all figured out now. Clearly not. On multiple levels. If you look around at the degradation, not only of the human spirit, but also of things just as simple as architecture, you're going to see what I mean. The narrative we can build is the same one we already built our society, our civilization on in the past. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's bad. But the technocrats would have you believe that exact thing. That progress means never going back to what worked in the past. You know, they talk about factory farming, for example, and how evil it is. And I agree. I don't support factory farming. But their solution is to have fake food, to grow meat, quote unquote, in vats with genetically modified yeast and all these Franken processes that they do. That's their solution. My solution, the old solution. Go back to many smaller farms locally, not controlled by the technocrats, not controlled by marketing boards and cartels that make farmers destroy part of their product in order that food prices are equal everywhere all the time and we can ship it all around the world. Do you see exactly how that system that started to warp local farming, the idea that you would, instead of selling your grain directly, you brought it to a grain marketing board and then it was all dumped in one big vat and divvied out. You see how that led exactly to the problem we're having today, where farmers cannot ship their food around because of supply chain issues. Imagine if as a local farmer, you were free to just sell your food to whoever was around. That would solve this whole problem, wouldn't it? It would solve the whole problem if farmers could just sell their food however they wanted to. But they can't. And now, instead of going back to that system, the technocrat narrative is you can never go backwards. You always have to think of a new solution that's never been thought of before. And in this case, it's genetically modified Frankenfood. I don't want that, do you? So you can see why they are panicking in a certain way and saying, oh my gosh, we have to come up with the narrative that people will like for all of this. We have to sell them on all of our newfangled solutions. And it has to have a great story. Otherwise, people will see it for what it is, which is eating bugs, for example. Taking cold showers, owning nothing and being happy. Getting your boosters of toxic chemicals every few months to get your digital permission to have a steak occasionally, a rare indulgence, or even just go into a shopping mall or on a train. What narrative are they going to come up with that convinces everybody that that's a good idea? Well, the sheikh who was there, Al Gargawi, he said, well, listen, we need something because there's this great wealth disparity now. Imagine a sheikh standing up and saying that. How insane is that? Well, is he prepared to give away his own money? Will Klaus Schwab say, hey, billionaires who meet every year here at Davos, you should just give money directly to communities so they can feed the hungry? No, they never say stuff like that. That's old-fashioned. That's what the churches might have done back in the day, and we can't do anything they did because, first of all, it's to do with religion and faith, and second of all, it's what we did in the past. We can never again do the things that worked in the past because we're all about progress. Oh my, my, my. That's the trickiest black magic spell they ever cast. That anything from the past is bad and anything they do going forward is progress. No matter what, no matter the outcome, it's progress. Right? Let me read you a few things that were said at this conference. This man stood up at the podium and he said that the government's role is to aid human evolution. He said, we sit in the first minute of the second wave of human evolution through technology. In 50 years, we will be totally different. The pace of change now is fast, and technology is making all of life just one platform, one technological platform. He said, the government has carried on in the same way for the last 200 years. But meanwhile, in the background, the private sector has reinvented themselves. Now, with the pandemic, government realizes it also needs to evolve. And he said that his idea of government is to design a better future through altering people. He actually said that they would design the DNA, but I don't know, he might have been speaking metaphorically there. He says, too, that the Middle East is in the center of this complex world, and it's up to them, and Dubai in particular is such a shining example of this, to make everything inclusive, so that when no matter where you go in the world, you will see people that look like you and are dressed like you. He says Dubai is the center of the complex in terms of politics, religion, and history. What does that mean to you? What would that mean to Klaus Schwab? What does that mean to a globalist? Because they don't like any religion. They want one world religion. Do you think that the Islamic people are okay with that? I doubt they are. I'm not, as a Christian. What he said too was that Dubai and the UAE and the Middle East in general is at the forefront of this because they have a very young population. And he says a lot of the government ministers are very young. So this helps them live in the future rather than the past. You know, I mean, gee, I wonder why. Could it be because they don't have that history? They don't have the experience? They can't see how much we've lost through progress. They have no idea what we've lost. They've grown up their entire lives in a warring situation where, you know, the United States and other countries have just tried to decimate them for the sake of oil. So in their minds, how easy must it be to say oil is bad in every way? It must be very easy. So that then hooks them into the climate change agenda stuff. With, you know, it's all a snowball on one another. Did you know that the UAE and Dubai were the first country to cooperate fully with the World Economic Forum? The UAE was only founded in 1971. And at that time, in their country, they had only 40 people who had graduated university. So they decided they would pick the president from among those 40 people. Does any of this sound remotely like democracy or like the culture that we built in the last 2,000 years from the foundation of Christianity? Do you see any connection between those two things at all? No. And the totalitarians, the technocrats, they want to sever that tie completely. A whole new world, literally, built by young people with no concept of the past, really. And especially in the UAE, they would have no concept of the foundations that Christianity laid, that we subsequently built glorious institutions on top of. Klaus Schwab also talked during this speech thing here, and one thing I noticed that he said a couple of times was that they have trouble now. They're running into a roadblock because of the pandemic. And he said what's happened is people have become more self-interested. That's what he says. And he said this has led to a downturn in their willingness to compromise. Twice he said this, that it's hard to get people to compromise. And I can't help but think of A.W. Tozer when he said, "We are not here to compromise. We're not here to dialogue. We're not interested in watering down our faith and beliefs for the sake of the other side so that they can be more comfortable." Remember? Well, Klaus Schwab is all about compromise. And what does it really mean? It means giving up some of your fundamental beliefs, the culture you have grown up in, that you love, that has supported you, that has supported all the rights that we hold dear. Klaus Schwab is not interested in any of that. That has to go in order for the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution to come along. Tons of people out there from a lot of different walks of life have addressed this issue in their own way. But what I haven't seen very much of is people suggesting that we need to go back to the Christian foundations upon which our society and our civilization and our rights and our freedom was built. They dance all around it. They use words that are very secular, sometimes legalistic, sometimes moralistic, but they won't go for the heart of the matter. I see people talking about it in a New Age sort of way. I see people talking about it in a utopian libertarian sort of way. But I don't see very many people copping to the fact that everything we have gained in the last 2,000 years is because we built our societies, most of Europe, some of Africa, and all of North America, on a Christian foundation. Christian. We need to return to it. So how can we make that the new narrative? We're up against a lot of forces here. We're up against the secularization of much of the West. We're up against science because, to a lot of people, science disproved the idea of a spirit, of God. And we're up against people who are cowardly, or they're worried about going too far. And in a place like where I live, if you start talking about God and Jesus, you've just gone too far. People can't handle it. France is so atheist. But if we keep just trying to frame the new narrative in terms of rights, in terms of morals, which shift all the time, in terms of appealing to common sense, I just don't think that's good enough. I do not think it's good enough. When you get up in the morning and you don't have a reason to die as well as a reason to live, then you don't have a compelling narrative, in my opinion. If there's literally nothing you would die for, if death is your top fear, then you don't have much of a narrative. If there isn't a group that is united under one umbrella, then your narrative isn't a narrative at all. It's just a collection of stories from tribes and bands, and I don't know if I'm explaining this well. Let me put it this way. I'm seeing a ton of groups spring up. Democracy Canada, Justice Center Canada, Liberty Coalition Canada, Take Back Our Freedoms, the nurses people, the pilots, the doctors, and even they have subgroups. This is no good. This is no good. First of all, why aren't all those groups joining together under a bigger umbrella? And secondly, that's all kind of, that does reflect the self-interest, doesn't it? It's self-interest rather than a commitment to something much, much bigger. That a man would sacrifice his life to wash away the sins of the entire planet. Anyone who believes in him is part of this narrative, part of this group that believes that there are things worth laying down your life for. They're not that afraid to die because they believe that there is something afterward. They share songs, traditions, prayers. There's a fellowship there that needs to be revived. That's the important narrative. That's the strong, compelling argument. That's how we can come together. And while we're in this weird gap where the World Economic Forum, the technocrats, and the totalitarians admit they've dropped the ball, eating the bugs, having cold showers, and owning nothing and being happy for the sake of the planet with their dubious claims of climate emergencies, that is a losing narrative. See what I'm saying? The nurses fighting on their own to be reinstated for their job, that's a losing narrative. One or two court cases here that's going to take 10, 15 years to wind their way through the courts, that's a losing narrative. Constant outrage about people getting tickets and fines, that's a losing narrative. Christianity is a winning narrative. And all these people that are too shy to even look at it, that think they're too sophisticated, we've progressed too far to go back to something like that. They're wrong. They're wrong. And I'm doing my part to try to bring them over. And I'm trying to get Christians to come out too. Stop being shy. This is powerful. All right, everybody, I'm going to stop talking now. I really hope you enjoyed it. Head on over to my site, amazingpolly.net. There, we've just revamped it. I'm going to ask you too, if you make a donation on my site and you have any difficulty with that whatsoever, send me an email, please, at pollystg@protonmail.com. Because like I said, we just revamped it. Not 100% sure that those buttons are working. All right. Please like, please thumbs up, please subscribe, please share. Leave a comment. Did I say that? My goodness. I can't concentrate. Until next time, everybody. Peace out.